Welcome to another episode of Swarm of Comics. I'm Randy, your handsome and humble host. Um, that's a wonderful alliteration. Sure, I'm even saying that word wrong, but I'm sure Stan Lee would appreciate it. But unfortunately, he'll probably never see this. So today, what I wanted to talk about was nostalgia collecting, and obviously related to comic books, because that's what I talk about here. I think once you get to a certain age, I think a lot of people start to go back and want to relive parts of their childhood. They want to collect the toys they used to have. They want to collect the toys they never had. I think we do that with Matchbox cars and Star Wars toys. Once you have that level of disposable income, you like to revisit that. You want to collect them. You want to display them. You want to show them to your kids. You want your kids to fall in love with them. And comic books are really no different. I mean, people buying books that they could never have. I mean, obviously, when I was a kid, not obviously, but I never had a Hulk 181. It was too expensive when I was a kid, which is ridiculous because it wasn't expensive. It just was outside of my budget. So I've started to go down that path of collecting books that I had never had before. Grails, personal grails, collectible grails, whether I like the cool cover or I feel like it's going to be a good investment or make a good display. And I had a video talking about really cool covers that I like collecting. Really cool covers I like collecting. More alliterations. So when I started going down this path of collecting more slabs and collecting for investment and really diving into books that I had never owned before, books that I wanted to own, or books that I had owned when I was a kid, and they were probably in ratty condition, and I wanted to rebuy. And that's sort of a path I went down. Once I ran out of money to buy real expensive books or nice books, I started going down the path of buying books that reminded me of my childhood, books that were important to me, books that were key to my growth in becoming a comic book collector and reader and fan. This comic book collector and this comic fan. I'm more of a reader for 40 years. I've always been a collector because I keep some of them, but I've never been a collector until now, like a collector, investment collector, like I want to build up my collection. I just read comic books. And that's probably in a way a bad thing from an investment standpoint because I barely kept boards and bags in my comic books. I put them in boxes or I stacked them up. I just didn't have that type of time. So I wanted to talk about a couple of books and show you guys a couple of books that I had purchased recently over the past months, year, whatever it's been, that were a nostalgia trip for me. They were definitely fun to collect. And one of the things I also did is I went and I dug up some of the original books that I still have. I mentioned in another video that I got rid of 20, 30,000 books. I don't know, 25, 30 long boxes. Got rid of almost everything, but I kept a lot of key stuff and some things that I still wanted to hold on to. So I'm going to start with the first G.I. Joe comic that I ever owned. I bought it on a rack. It was a store called Archie Kent's, and it was in Hingham, Massachusetts. And we would go in and there would be comic books there and we would buy comic books. My mother would go to Marshall's to go shopping. And we would go into the pharmacy and they had the spinning rack, which, by the way, I've looked up how much it costs to buy an old spinning rack, selling them on eBay, and I've seen them anywhere from $600 to $1,400 depending on the rack and whether it has the base. Apparently those are even collectible now, but that would be cool to have in the background. I know like Comic Tropes has one, and those are pretty neat. Maybe they make a new one. Maybe IKEA has a one that's a new version of it. But anyway, we'd go to this rack, my brother Bill and I, and we would look at all the comic books, and we didn't know what ones to buy. You just bought them based on the cover. And we loved G.I. Joe. We had the G.I. Joe action figures. We were Star Wars figure fans, and before that we were G.I. Joe fans. We had the full-size G.I. Joe with there was a white tiger and there was a Jeep and the tents, and we had all these things. I'll never forget Christmas. My mom and dad had bought us all, Santa Claus had bought us all these G.I. Joe toys and set them all up. And back when I was a kid, Santa Claus took everything out of the boxes and set everything up. we come in from the other room in the apartment we lived in, and there was G.I. Joe in a Jeep and tents and all his clothes laid out and everything like that. So we were fans and playing with G.I. Joes before we got to the 3 3/4 inch toys. So once Star Wars came around, and we were obviously went to go see Star Wars in the theaters in 1977. My brother Bill was terrified of the trash compactor scene. Hopefully he doesn't watch this, because then he might think I'm making fun of him, but I'm not. It was pretty scary. Also, I hope he is watching this, because I would love the views. Star Wars fans, action figures, land the plane, Randy. I get it. But when G.I. Joe came out in 1981, it could have been 82, we were hooked. I mean, we were always playing war in the yard with, plastic guns and stuff, and playing war. And G.I. Joe came out. So we suddenly were absolutely enthralled with this. And when we got to the comic store, the pharmacy, and there was a comic rack, and there was a G.I. Joe comic book, how could I not buy that? So this is the first book. It is in absolute terrible condition. Staple pulls. I probably read this a million times. I don't know who wrote on the cover. This is 1984. I don't know who wrote on the cover, but somebody wrote, "Oh no," on the cover. And I don't know whose writing that is. And this is probably going to be blurry no matter how far or close that I am, because my camera still stinks. But this, I saw G.I. Joe and I saw this cover, and I had to have this. So this is G.I. Joe number 20 from 1984. And it's Clutch goes home to New Jersey. I should reread it just to get more details, but I remember Clutch. He drove the Jeep type vehicle they had. Get it, Clutch? Because it was, yeah, you got it. And he went home to visit New Jersey. And of course, there was Cobra adventures there and everything like that. And apparently he's skydiving without a parachuter, whatever. So this was the first comic. I have not purchased the newer, nicer version of this yet, but I want to. Oh, God. When I get a nice camera, I'll show you this. This is, I think I could count. This is one of the worst conditions ever, but this is what we did. We read comic books. These pages look worse color than a Golden Age book. This was probably in a basement somewhere, but this was one of my books for my youth that I absolutely love, and I'll always remember, and I'll always keep this book. So that was the first one. The next book is Battle of the Planets. I'm going to give it away. I don't have to give a big hype or anything like that, but Battle of the Planets for us, when in 1978, everything was all Star Wars. 1977 came and everything was going to be sci-fi. I mean, before Star Wars, there was obviously science fiction, but it was stuff like Logan's Run. Who cares? We watched the stuff, we'd see it on Channel 56 and, on Sunday afternoons and things like that. We'd watch, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. But when Star Wars hit, space adventures, space operas took off everywhere. And Japanese animation had a cartoon called Gatchaman. You can correct me. It had a lot of different names, but the Americanized name was Battle of the Planets. And this is a Whitman book. Still has the 25-cent tag on it from when we bought it in 1980. And somebody drew on it as well with a marker. No, G, almost like a backwards G for Gatchaman. But Battle of the Planets. We loved Battle of the Planets. This is one of our favorite books. And February 1980. So we loved all the Japanese animation. There's the back of it, Star Wars. We love the Japanese animation. It started for us in our area with Battle of the Planets on TV. And after Battle of the Planets came Force 5, which was the 5 different Japanese anime shows. And it was like a serial. Every Monday you'd get one show, Tuesday. So the 5 shows were each day of the week. So every Tuesday was always Dan Gardace. Every Friday was always Guy King. And that was called Force 5. So we'd watch that. And that would lead right into, for me, the greatest anime I've ever watched. And it wasn't giant robots or anything like that, but it was Star Blazers. And maybe I'll do a thing about Star Blazers at some point. I actually picked up a couple of Comico versions of the Star Blazers comic. So, but this is where Japanese anime started for me, and probably a lot of you who are my age, which is very young. So I didn't rebuy this. I don't even know if I would bother to, but what I did buy is something I never had, which was Battle of the Planets #1. Yeah, we'll get around that light there. Battle of the Planets #1. This is a 9.4, 1979 gold key book, Win Mortimer art. And it's a photograph cover of the TV show. It's pretty blurry if you actually see it in person. It's not very high quality. And everything's crooked, but it's a 9.5. Everything's crooked, but it's a 9.4 Battle of the Planets #1. And the funny story about this is that this was up for auction and it was getting a little pricier than I wanted to. And I did the classic blunder. And I know Jim from Bronzeville can appreciate this because he was just talking about it in one of his videos. Go watch Bronzeville Comics on YouTube. His videos are wonderful. They're not fancy, and that's what I love about them because I'm not fancy either. But long story longer, I was bidding on this book and I really wanted it. And it was a live auction, not eBay or anything like that. And the pricing got a little higher than I wanted. And I got caught up and I just kept bidding until I won it. And I was hoping somebody was going to outbid me so I didn't win it. And I suddenly got buyer's remorse once I realized what I was paying for, which is not a lot of money. And it's not like any of these books here, but for what it is, it was a lot of money. And G-Force to the rescue. That's what we call them, G-Force. That was the name of the team there. I think it was called like, oh God, I have to do some research before I start talking, but I think they were called like Science Team, some teenagers or something like that. Whatever they were, the kids in the G-Force had another name, Science something or other, whatever it is. But anyway, I had buyer's remorse while the live auction, online auction was going on and nobody outbid me and then I won it. And I don't regret it and I actually like it, but I'm glad I got it. So anyway, that was a book that I never had when I was younger and I decided to buy. Now falls into that category. Now the next book is obviously going to be an important one because everybody knows this title. And this is my first X-Men book I bought. And this was 1983. And I had never heard of the X-Men before. I obviously had Spider-Man comic books or Batman comic books, Archie, you know, Casper, anything that we would get. We just got what you got when you got it, you know. And this book was absolutely one of the game changers for me. There's a lot of fun books here to look at, but this was a game changer for me. And this was an X-Men. Not only did I love the cover and it drew me right in, it was just crazy. And it turns out it's John Romita Jr., who became one of my favorite artists until recently when apparently he doesn't know how to draw well anymore. And I don't know how that happens, but this is it. This is X-Men 176. I'm going to go back here. X-Men 176. Cyclops is underwater getting bamboozled by a squid or an octopus or whatever it is, and he's blowing up the X-Men logo. And a 12-year-old kid sees this. How would you not buy this? It was my introduction to X-Men. This was my introduction to everything. And this is pretty beat up. This is probably a 2. If that. And I've probably read this 100 times. Matter of fact, my brother's probably read this too. And I seem to remember we used to read each other's comic books and I used to charge them a dime to read my comic books at one point. I think they got past that toll by just going into my closet and reading my comic books when I wasn't looking. But this is pretty beat up, but this was it. This was X-Men 176. Absolutely fantastic cover. So of course, I needed to buy a nice, beautiful newer version of it, better version. It's not newer, but it's slabbed. And this is a 9.4 and absolutely beautiful condition. I'm not even sure why it's a 9.4 and not greater. There is not a single spine tick. There is not a single blunted corner. The colors are fantastic. Off-white to white pages. I guess that's why. I guess it got to be white pages with a modern book or Bronze Age book, 1983. So this is absolutely fantastic. And this looks wonderful. But this is also a book where I didn't want to spend the money on a 9.8 because why bother? But I wanted a better copy than a 7 or an 8. So 9.4 was sort of that happy middle ground when buying a book. And that's one of the things we should talk about with collecting is that I'm buying this for nostalgia purposes, not for investment purposes. Obviously any of these books back here, you'd want the highest possible grade you could get because it'll just skyrocket in value. That Hulk right there, 181, if you had that in a 9.4, I mean, you could buy a new house with the damn thing. I mean, that's how expensive it is. The difference between the price in a 9.4 and a 9.8 for this isn't enough for me to justify paying it or justify keeping it as an investment. This is a me book. I want this up somewhere on a wall to see. And every time I walk in, I'm reminded of it and I love it. Every time I see it, that nostalgia bug bites. So that was it. Uncanny X-Men 176. Big book in my collecting history. The next book is a Daredevil book. And this was my introduction to Daredevil. And bought this book. It's 1981, but I probably didn't buy it in 1981. I have a feeling we bought it in 82. It could have been. But it still has a sticker on it from when I bought it at a local store. So we had a store and it was a regional Massachusetts store called Paperama. And imagine like the party store now. It had party stuff, but it also had books and it was just kind of a catch-all store. And it was a pretty big chain here for a long time and they had comic books. And this was it. This was Daredevil 180 from 1981, and I probably bought it in 82, but it's still got the sticker from Paperama that says 25 cents on it. And again, like the others, this has been read 1,000 times. This is a well-loved book. Is that what we say? Well-loved. It's in better shape than the other ones, but this was Frank Miller book. This was my introduction to Frank Miller. When I saw this cover, it was terrifying. This is also a fantastic story. The story is basically the Kingpin's wife ends up down in the sewers and there's these sort of creepy beings. I think she was going through some mental issues. And one of the things that makes this an absolutely fantastic book is, my recollection is that Daredevil goes to rescue her for the Kingpin. And that was his arch enemy. He'd actually only been his arch enemy for a short time. I just learned this not that long ago. The Kingpin was only first met Daredevil in issue 170, and this is 180. It was just 10 issues before this. We think of the Kingpin as the arch enemy of Daredevil, but obviously he was one of the arch enemies of Spider-Man. Also in that issue 170, that's the first time you learn his name. He was always just the Kingpin before that. But I should have brought that up. Issue 170 of Daredevil has the Kingpin, and his name is revealed as Wilson Fisk. But anyway, it's kind of a cool concept for a book, and I was just hooked on this cover. How do you not love this cover? And what's also interesting is that it looks like, I don't know, I was going to say it's a direct edition because of this, but I don't think so. I think this came from, maybe this was a direct edition. But I didn't buy it at a comic book store. I didn't even know comic book stores existed yet. I think I discovered them right after this. But anyway, this book, absolute killer. Daredevil, ninjas, Morlock things there, Kingpin. We're absolutely hooked. Daredevil was hands down one of our most favorite books. And of course, Klaus Janson and Frank Miller. And the best part is if you actually look at the credits down here, it doesn't even say Frank Miller. It just says Miller. Story and art. Just Miller and just Janson. It just gave their first names. But one of my favorite books. And I had to rebuy that as well. So there it is in beautiful shape. On a blurry camera, they all look beautiful shape. But trust me, this is a 9.2. Kingpin and Vanessa Fisk appear. And also Elektra's in this one too. And we loved Elektra when we were a kid. Another one that says it's a 9.2, maybe because it's off-white to white pages, but it's got a little crease in at the top here. But beautiful 9.2. Another book not worth buying a 9.8 in. Just not that key of an issue. It's not worth spending that money. This was the good, comfortable ground I was at to buy this book. And that's what I'm talking about here is like, this nostalgia trip of just kind of revisiting this, having nice copies, being able to display them, and not to worry too much about investment. So super cool book. If you ever want to read this, if you don't know this, love this. Even Daredevil leaping out of the box here. He wasn't just in it standing there. I don't know if I look at another book or something like that, there's the heads on the X-Men, but Daredevil's leaping out of there. That's just such a cool cover. So That's another one. Moving along here, another book that I rebought that was super important when we were kids, back to G.I. Joe. And I had the shirt on in my last video, which I'm sure you watched, is G.I. Joe number 21. We bought this new. This is my original copy. Bought this in 1983. Once I was hooked on G.I. Joe. And this is so beat up. I'm pretty sure I can see all of the lines where I probably traced this to draw it. It has more spine ticks than I even can count, because I can't count well. And this is absolutely beat to hell book. But this is just absolutely amazing. I'm not 100% sure who did the cover. The credits are really tiny. Someone's going to find out for me. I guess I could look it up on the internet, but it's a Larry Hama story, of course, and Steve Leialoha art inside. So this was the silent interlude issue where there are no words. There's no words. There's no thought balloons. There's nothing like nobody speaks. It's just a mission for Snake Eyes to go rescue, I think it was Scarlet, and get out of there. And this is just one of the most iconic covers and one of my favorite books of all time. And I remember still buying this and how much we loved this. Also, there was Frogger, if you wanted. I think we should show the back of these books more too. Back of the books are super cool. So, of course, I wanted to buy a newer version of this. And this is a key book, and it is collectible and gets expensive. So I had to be careful with that. And there it is. There is 9.2 of this. Again, to display. It has collectability, and it'll probably... Oh, and actually, I realized the difference here. Mine was newsstand, a newsie, which is apparently a thing we care about now. But this was a direct edition, and this was a newsie, because I bought it probably at Archie Kent's pharmacy, drugstore, we'd call it back then. Go to the drugstore, and I still have it. And then this was a direct edition. But this is a beautiful copy, and I love this. Super important to me. It's also, oh, I didn't even remember, first appearance of Storm Shadow. That's one of the reasons it's also key, not only just because it's collectible, but awesome, awesome. Now, these books are not ones that I've really rebought. I mean, I have, but I don't know where my originals are. I might not even have them. This is a key book. It's never going to be super expensive, but it's a great book, and I wanted to buy it. And I didn't even remember it was as far back as 1985. When I started buying comic books, Spider-Man and Peter Parker, Spectacular Spider-Man, Amazing Spider-Man, they'd already been established. You know, this was a new Spider-Man book. This was mind-blowing to me that they would come out with a new Spider-Man book. And I remember when the hype around this, and it was Web of Spider-Man #1. If I have it somewhere, I don't know where it is. But this was an important book. It's never going to be super expensive. That's why I could afford the 9.6. Never super expensive, and it's never going to be. And there's a billion of them. I know 9.8s get there, and I think there's even a 9.9, but this was important. This is a Charles Vess cover too, like pretty much painted cover. This was a new Spider-Man book for me. Now we get a new Spider-Man book every 20 days or something like that. But in 1985, when I was a kid, this was mind-blowing that we'd get a brand new Spider-Man book. And I never loved Peter Parker, Spectacular Spider-Man. I always thought the stories were second fiddle to Amazing Spider-Man. So super important book to me. Loved this. Don't know where my original is, but I remember getting that. This book, I do have the original one. And I wouldn't say this was a super key book, but it's an important book, and it's a good book. I have the original, and it's in really good condition except for one reason, and I have my brother Bill to thank for that. Sorry, Bill. It is Incredible Hulk 340. I was not a kid. I was, but it was 1988. But I mean, the most iconic McFarlane cover, and I absolutely loved this book. Super clean, amazing cover. Had to share this because this definitely was, McFarlane era here in Incredible Hulk. He made Incredible Hulk cool. I couldn't say I cared much about Incredible Hulk before that. He made Incredible Hulk a good book to read, and that's influenced my reading of comics since then in appreciation. Although I can't say I love Immortal Hulk, but that's fine. Other people do. My brother was shooting a BB gun in the house, and it went into one of my box of comics and put a BB hole in the front of my copy. So I wanted to rebuy this one. Very collectible, very key, great book. Hulk versus Wolverine. Love this one. This next book was another one that we originally had purchased. We probably still do have this. My brother might have this, actually. This was 1983. Again, I don't think we bought the first one right away. I think my brother bought the third issue or something like that. But of course, it was super iconic at the time, and an iconic cover. It's Indiana Jones, Further Adventures of Indiana Jones #1. Actually, a really good book with cool adventures, good art in most of them until it's time it started losing steam, and the later issues weren't that great. And I think we had the whole run of this. And this was just such an amazing book. It was super important to myself, but even more important to my brother, Bill. So this is a Terry Austin cover, 1982 cover, but I think this actually came out eventually. Yeah, very beginning of 83. So we started collecting Indiana Jones back then. I wanted to get a new copy. Again, never going to be worth a lot of money, unfortunately, even though it was a really good book. But so got myself a 9.6. Beautiful book. Further Adventures of Indiana Jones. Really good quality stuff. Pick that up. And then we have 2 books, and I don't even know which one to do next. I have both of these. I still have them. Mine are actually not even terrible condition. Oh, I can see why this is a 9.4. I can see in the right light that there is sort of an indent there at the top. That's why it's a 9.4. I wonder if you get that pressed and resubmitted. Anyway, another game-changing book for us. This was 1984, so I was 13 years old. And obviously a Spider-Man fan and buying Spider-Man and collecting Spider-Man. And this came out. Amazing Spider-Man 252. You might recognize it as one of the most important books of the 1980s and maybe ever. There's always a debate about which book came out first to show the new outfit. Is it the Marvel Team Up 141? Is it this book, which technically came out first? But what happened is, of course, the origin of the black suit, the symbiote, is Secret Wars #8, which we also have, and I probably also have somewhere. The problem is that that book was so late. These books came out first. And this book, I think it was this one, he pops out of a cave in Central Park in this outfit, talking about, wow, well, that was a crazy adventure in the Secret Wars and blah, blah, blah. But if you bought this and you were a kid in 1983, 84, I was 13, you had no idea what it was talking about. There's just suddenly this pops up. He's in another outfit. It wasn't on TV like the death of Superman. It wasn't anything like Death of Captain America that was all over the internet. This was Spider-Man has a new outfit. Of course, we saw it in advertisements or whatever, but there's no, and this even says it, ties with Marvel Team Up 141 for first appearance of black costume. Amazing Fantasy 15 cover homage. Is that how you say that? But I had this book. I bought this when it came out new. This is a newsie, which mostly were anyway, 1984. So super important book to me. Huge impact, my collecting, and obviously huge impact in the world of comic books. So that's a super cool one. I'm getting mine submitted. I'm guessing it's going to come in at like an 8, but I don't think I care. And that's another topic. I have books that I want to submit that are my books or books are important to me that might not be worth a lot of money. If I take this 8, I paid 60 cents for it, and it's an 8, and I get it submitted and it's a modern book. It's going to cost me $22 plus shipping, maybe get it pressed. I'm going to be all in at, $40, $30. It's probably going to be worth more than $40, but maybe not. But to me, it's my book. And I wish I had looked at my collection first to see the condition of mine before I went and bought another one. I just assumed mine had been beat to death, but it's not. It's not as ratty as this thing or anything like that. It's actually in really good shape. So next book, it's the last one. We're almost through. But the last book here was an important book because this was not just a comic story, it was a comic mystery that went on for years and ended terribly. If you look up comic tropes and you look up YouTube search comic tropes Hobgoblin, and it's a great background and history about this character and how the whole saga ended up so poorly. But for me at the time, it did not end poorly. It was just, we didn't even get to the end. It was just this amazing mystery that you loved. There might have been mysteries in comic books before that, but I don't remember them, and I'm not really sure. This was a mystery. You wanted to know. You read every book, and they teased you. Every book was, taking the mask off. Oh, it's just someone pretending to be him. But this was the first appearance of Hobgoblin. And I did not buy this new. I bought this used without the tattoos. And I probably bought it not long after it came out, but I didn't get this one new. I wasn't going to a comic book store. I was buying comics from a pharmacy or a store, and I just missed it. So this is a newsstand edition, 9.0, and first appearance of Hobgoblin, and the tattoos and insert are there. And if you ever look at the tattoos, they're not actual, their tattoos are inside. And the way you would see them is hold the book up to the light and you'll see through the paper. You don't realize it, but some people think you have to send away for the tattoos, but the tattoos are actually in there if you open it. And I double checked my book and it does not have the tattoos. This actually says it's 1982. I think it came out in 1992, but it was came out in 1982, but the date on it was March of 1983. And comic books and probably other magazines were always way ahead. So if something said it was March 1983, it might have come out in 1982, but they were putting things out months in advance in case they got behind. They would have a little cushion there. So this book was huge for me. And I love this book and I've read it a million times. And I love the Hobgoblin and the whole concept behind it. Of course, we know the Green Goblin. I remember the Green Goblin from when I was a kid. And books and comic books, we all knew the Green Goblin, but this was just a really cool concept of taking over because the supposedly the Green Goblin was dead. And this character, who turned out to be Ned Leeds, which is the worst reveal ever. Sorry, I should have said spoilers. Ned Leeds, the reporter, and he becomes how he became rich to be able to buy all this stuff and keep going. I don't know, and why he decided to do it. It was a terrible plot line, and it wasn't supposed to be him. I don't remember. The comic tropes thing says maybe it was supposed to be the Kingpin's son at one point. I don't think they decided who it was going to be. But anyway, super important book. Love this one. Helped build my love of comic books, and all of these helped build my love of comic books that I still have today. So, and also I hope you appreciate my shirt. Maybe this is a little verboten. I don't know, but I love this shirt, and felt like it fit the theme of the show. So anyway, hope you enjoyed this. I'm Randy at Swarm of Comics. And if I'd appreciate it if you go click on like, if you add comments, if you subscribe to the channel, or don't, if you don't want to, that's fine. But anyway, I'm Randy at Swarm of Comics, and you've been everybody else.